Hello, everyone. My name is Hassan Tahir Latif, and I'm one of the editors at the Aleph Review. The Aleph Review is an annual creative anthology based in Pakistan, and this is going to be our fifth annual volume that's going to come out in a couple of weeks, inshallah. Joining me today are the other editors at the Aleph Review. We have our publishing editor and our editor-in-chief, Mehvash Amin. We have our associate editor, Ilona Yusaf from Islamabad, and Afshan Shafi, our senior contributing editor. Not here are two other very integral members of our team. Our layout artist, who's been with the Aleph Review right from the start. And we also have Jamil Masood, who does our pre-production, and without whom we'd be very, very lost.
So this past year was a difficult year for a lot of us in our personal lives, in our professional lives, and naturally coming out with the fifth anniversary issue of the Aleph Review, for which we were all very, very excited. It seemed a more monumental task than before. So I'd like to begin by asking Mehvash Amin to speak a bit about that. How was last year for you when it came to compiling the Aleph?
Well, first off, I want to thank LLF for giving us this, allowing us this venue to be able to speak about it, and also for the very wonderful launch that they had for the Aleph Review last year. Because normally we have a launch of our own, as you know. But last year, soon after our launch at the LLF, things became really bad, and we didn't have a launch. We also were very superstitious, like everybody else, about whether the virus could be transmitted from surfaces or not, or it was all very fluid last year. So but as you all know, as all four of you know, we all started immediately. We put the new book, which could have been better marketed, I feel, because we couldn't have a launch of our own either in Islamabad or in Karachi, where we were planning to have it, or in Lahore, another launch. So I think, but what we did do was that we regrouped pretty soon, although we couldn't regroup in person. We regrouped through email and through calls, etc. And we went on with the next issue. And I think that was a great thing that we did, that we started off immediately, even though we weren't sure exactly where it would take us. Luckily, in the publishing business, you can communicate by email, by Zoom, by calls, etc. So, and in any case, three of us are in Islamabad, three of us are here in Lahore at the best of times. So Ilona's in Islamabad, Afshan and myself and Hassan are here, and Jamil is in Islamabad, and so is Sana. So at the best of times, we work kind of around that geographical problem. So I think what we did, which was great, was that we decided to go ahead, go as usual. Had our meetings over the phone and whichever way we could. And we eventually managed to get a whole lot of stuff together, even more than most times, because I think we had, Hassan, if I'm not mistaken, we had about 100 contributions on the last day of our submission date.
Talking about the submissions, even though, we were very grateful that we received that many unsolicited ones, each of us, we also make sure that we reach out to people, we reach out to established people, as well as, try to find unpublished voices that we find promising, that we think should be given a platform. And so I'm going to ask each of the editors, starting with Ilona Yusaf, how was the process this year for you in terms of reaching out to people? Were they responsive? Did other people have creative blocks, or were they more willing to submit something whenever you asked them?
A lot of people were affected in different ways by the pandemic. I found it, the initial lockdown, it was kind of easier for me than later on. And I think contacting other people, then, people that I had kind of earmarked for this issue, several of them kind of didn't respond. If we're talking about established names, they already had, projects in the works. So it's not always easy to get work from established authors, but in general, everybody's been very responsive. So, whether it was like, if we couldn't have actual creative writing, then we had interview. So that itself is a great thing.
And what about you, Afshan? You're generally the one who finds us a lot of these younger writers, and I'm actually very curious now that we're having this discussion. How do you approach this, and where do you find all these people?
Well, I just try to stay updated with what's going on with international literary magazines, and I just try to kind of keep abreast of emerging writers as well as established writers, because I think there's a lot of hidden gems out there. So I do just manage to basically read a lot and just stay abreast of all of that. But during COVID, actually, I was pleasantly surprised that all the writers I reached out to, they were very forthcoming, and they actually said that they had more time on their hands because of lockdown. So they were actually producing more work. It's not true for everyone, but some of the international poets I did approach said that this was a good coping mechanism for them, basically, to keep busy with work and to keep write. So that was actually quite good for me. They sent in their submissions really early, and I sent them to Mrs. Amin very early on. So it was a pleasant surprise.
And now, talking about the fifth volume, it just so happened, and somehow this has occurred every year, that whatever we choose to be our theme for the upcoming volume somehow is the zeitgeist of that year. When I remember it was our second volume when it was magical realism essentially, and all of a sudden that's what all of us were into as well. But this time we had decided that it'll be Tree of Life, because it is our fifth volume, and we wanted it to be a bit celebratory, but somehow Tree of Life just took on a very different meaning during this year. So how does, after we decided the theme and, the entire global situation changed, how did you all react to that when it came to your own personal writing? And so I think I'd start with Mrs. Amin.
So Hassan, as we started going for submissions and finding stuff and asking for submissions, sometimes it's not everybody who wants to write on a particular theme. If I remember, we came up with a theme because some of the younger writers very much wanted to have a theme on which to be able to write, because maybe it was a guiding sort of focal point towards which they could converge their writing. So I remember the meeting in which we decided on Tree of Life, and I think Afshan was the one who came up with that particular phrase. And of course, I mean, then we started getting submissions, but there's always a lag between the time that we send in our theme, or we put it up on our Facebook, etc., and then we start getting submissions. I must say, some submissions we got very early on, and that was great. But at the same time, it's a strange dichotomy between what Ilona is saying and what Afshan is saying, because I found myself reflecting on this whole situation and the larger picture a lot. I mean, the whole thing of a pandemic. I mean, imagine, it's a Chinese curse, right? May you live in interesting times. And here we are, we've seen so much, and now we are seeing the pandemic, which only happens once in 100 years. And the larger picture just kept on niggling at my mind, and I started writing quite a bit of poetry and quite a bit of stuff. In fact, it unblocked me a little bit because there was that lag before we got all the submissions, before we had to, and then we had to, do you remember, we got those 100 on the last day, and we had to zip through them and read them all, and my God, it was quite a trying situation at that point. And there were so many which were really nice submissions. And the funny thing is, like, we have divided it somewhat, our entire team. So Afsha and Ilona kind of look more at the poetry, definitely, and me and Hassan, we look more at the prose. But there are times that when you're very unsure and you get too many nice things, and then you end up sending stuff to Ilona and Afsha and asking them that so many good things. You remember?
Yeah.
And some in particular, I mean, and in fact, I regret in our haste to wait for things. I remember one very good author that Afshan suggested, and I love the story as well. And he was from abroad.
Yeah,
and
Steve.
We weren't quick enough to grab him. Yeah, and then he went elsewhere. So I think what it taught me particularly, Hassan, was that, use each moment, don't procrastinate, hurry up with your own writing, hurry up with whatever you have in hand, whatever's there in front of you, just read it, get hurry up with things. I mean, that's in real terms of the magazine, that's what it taught me.
And just to add to that, while there are certain genres, for example, spoken word poetry, that we might not have considered that much. However, there are other genres that we have been open to. So, for example, the graphic novel or science fiction, which is by other publications often considered genre writing, and then they have it up on their website. We don't accept flash fiction or genre writing, but that's something that we've been open to. So I'm just going to throw this question to you, Ilona, Auntie, as well. Considering the diversity of the types of literature that we've accepted over the years, what do you think is the voice of Aleph, or what does Aleph stand for essentially then?
Well, for me, I think any kind of writing, as Afshan said, edgy and basically good quality, but it can be anything that's good quality and maybe slightly modern, I would say. So again, what you were saying, Afshan, edgy and, well, also alternative. But what I want to say here is, again, when we receive submissions, then sometimes you see that the author has a voice, but it needs a little shape, or it needs to be kind of tightened a little without losing the author's voice, because that is very important. You can't be editing and putting your own voice into the writing. It has to be the author's own voice. But sometimes very, very minor edits can make a huge difference. And I think that attention to detail and making sure that it is the best quality possible, I think that gives us, identifies us.
True.
And also, if I may add, Hassan, after this whole selection process is done, then the whole, which you and I are kind of more involved with, the art, selecting the art, which is not necessarily from artists who have never produced that before. I mean, it's not like with artists, we say it has to be a new painting. I mean, with artists, we are much freer, but the art is a very important part of our journal. And it is because it might be interspersed with our stories, but it is never kind of, it's always reflective. As you know, it's never illustrative. I mean, so we already choose from the last crop of artists who have come up with things in the last year. And from that, or some established ones. I mean, in the first we had Saad Khan, because Jocelyn Ott Said had been painted by Saad Khan, and so we inserted that, or Said Akhtar, or whatever. Those are the established, always there artists. But the new lot of artists are so exciting, I think, in Pakistan. So I mean, they sometimes shake you to your core. And so we try to get those artists, some of the new artists, and bring them to our journal. And I would say that, I mean, if there are any young artists who are listening, they should actually contact us, so we can get some of them in as well.
And you're right. when it comes to art, what I think so far we've really limited ourselves to a certain type of art, but then over the course of the years, we've also tried to incorporate digital art somehow from younger writers. And it's very refreshing to see that a lot of times the submissions that come in, people send in their own art as well, that, perhaps you would want to use this one. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Otherwise, times we put it up on our social media. But I think art, even though we're not artists per se ourselves, I mean, Ilona Auntie does a lot of creative work in terms of art. I would say, I think that is, she's the closest when it comes to an artist. But we also just try to make sure that the art is reflective. And I think that's something that we would probably want to change in the future as well, and have calls for submission for art as well at times. I hope so. But we're really grateful to the gallery owners in Pakistan who've helped us at times source art. There's Tasir Art Gallery, the Jazz Art Gallery, Studio by O Art Space by Umar Nabi, Chokandi Art Gallery, and all of these people have really helped us. And I'm also very grateful to the younger artists who are very forthcoming with having their art published immediately. You reach out to them on Instagram, and then they're very they immediately respond to you. But talking about Robert Montgomery, Greta Bellamagina, Laura Albert, how have you, so we are essentially a Pakistani anthology, but now we're turning into this anthology that's based in Pakistan. And so the main focus of the anthology is to just collect different voices, as diverse as possible, while keeping the focus on emerging writers from Pakistan and the Pakistani diaspora. But when it comes to these other people who, as Mrs. Amin just said, that they sent in things on trust, what, as an editor, as a contributing editor who has to source these pieces, what was your interaction with these slightly bigger voices?
The thing is that I haven't really focused too much on kind of only contacting international authors who are on bestseller lists or who are very famous. I've basically, for Aleph, I've been quite true to my own personal tastes. And though I think not many people in Pakistan would know about authors really like Laura Albert or Greta or Robert. I mean, they are really from quite a niche world, especially Greta and Robert. They're from very niche kind of poetry world, British poetry world. But I always think that it's always exciting to see how a different writing from all across the world combines really in one anthology. So even though Greta and Robert write in a very modern, song-like, lyrical, and it's not very old-fashioned poetry at all. It's very modern. I still thought it would be good to reach out to them and to get some poems from them for Aleph. And Inua and I were published in the same anthology. And what he also does is that he also kind of might talk about Shakespeare, and then he would, write a poem full of expletives and kind of bring in Shakespearean words as well. So I find that kind of wordplay very exciting. I've said that many times before. So I reached out to Inua and send us some poems, and he's doing very well these days. And with Laura, I've kind of been in correspondence with Laura for over a decade and more. So, and she's been a very big supporter of Aleph's. She absolutely loves the art, and she was so surprised at how beautiful it was. And the same goes for Greta and Robert. I think that what you were talking about earlier with the art and the hybrid graphic short stories we've had, everyone actually rises as something very different.
Yeah, for sure. So, and now moving away from slightly people who've had who've honed their craft to a certain extent, when it comes to newer voices that need to be, as was mentioned earlier, that need to be tightened and need to be edited a bit, I would like to highlight that whenever a piece comes in that we find, especially with prose, I mean, I'm sure you guys do that with the poetry as well, but whenever it comes to prose and we find that the voice is promising or the plot is promising, but it requires some sort of tightening, it requires better editing, we as Aleph don't want to be just this, and now this is coming from me rather than as a question, that we don't want it to be this place that people just send in stuff, and whether we like it, we publish it. If we don't like it, we just chuck it out. But we're really on the, I'm using the word again, hunt for voices. But I think after this issue, I shouldn't even say hunt, because the amount of good unsolicited material that was sent in.
Yeah.
I think it's just a matter of marketing an anthology to the point that people understand that this exists, that this is where they can send in their work. And I think for the longest time, there wasn't any homegrown publication that was coming out year on year with the same quality where people could even send in their work. But most importantly, there's a mentorship aspect to submitting as a young writer to Aleph, because if you do send in something, if we like it, but we know that it can be improved, we will write back to you. We'll tell you how it can be improved. And obviously, at the end of the day, it's you as a writer or as a poet, it's up to you whether you accept those changes or not. But that mentorship is there. And I think that's something that all four of us are very much invested in, that not to disregard any emerging voice without giving them feedback. And I think, Mrs. Amin, if you'd like to add something to this, because you've had the most experience with
again, I think it is quite fascinating how some of these, how young people think also, because as far as mentorship is concerned, when I was writing poetry as a young person, I had two very good mentors, and one was Tawfiq Rafat, one was Kaleem Umar. And to the extent that Kaleem would come over, read my poems, slash them and tell me that, rewrite it again. I mean, this bit is good, but that's just rubbish and whatever. And then also give me books on, like, everybody who knows Tawfiq Rafat or Kaleem Umar knows about the Keats and about his, Ode to Autumn, and how it was, there was a book on that, on his, about each page was his drafts, and then they were like crossed out, etc. And then on the facing page they were written exactly as was in his own handwriting, but it was more legible because it was printed, right? And you read these pages and reams and reams and reams, and you realize that at the end, this poet has come up with this almost effortless bit of poem. So when we were, I think a couple of times trying to tell maybe a poet, maybe an author, that your voice is excellent, but it's going on for too long, and maybe you should cut this out, and maybe you should define it a little bit more, and because words can be just that. Too many words can also spoil a writing as much as maybe the wrong thought, or there's no such thing as a wrong or right thought. Sorry, the thought is there, but you have to learn to maybe play with your words and sometimes restrict them, because sometimes less is better than more. And I remember Hassan, you must remember, Ilona, you must remember, Afshan, that we tried to tell this to a couple of people, and they were
that one piece.
Yes, some took it exceptionally well and went along with the edits and whatever our suggestions, and some took it not well at all. And were a bit angry. And although we weren't forcing them to send in their thing, and surprisingly, I think one of them came back the next year. Although we thought we'd lost that voice, but surprisingly, that voice came back, because I think maybe over a year it's kind of percolated in that person's head that maybe a bit of what we are saying is perhaps correct.
Perhaps true.
And then that voice came back with another piece, and that also we kind of mentored a bit, right? We edited it a bit, and we stripped it of its too many words and whatever. But that voice agreed then. So it was that's very encouraging.
Apart from that, I also believe that it's because, and this leads me into the next question before we start wrapping up, that it's also, once again, the lack of publishing platforms. I'm so glad that there are new homegrown publications that are coming up, but there's a certain type of voice attached to each one of them. And I'm just going to repeat myself over here and tell any aspiring young writers and poets to just pick up a book and see what exactly what exactly are you submitting to. And with that, I'd also just like to add over here that apart from the book, when it comes to the Aleph, we also launched the website last year, and that website allows additional space for people to publish their work, because sometimes certain work, especially which has any visual element attached to it, is more, it's better read or better viewed on a desktop, on a computer or on a phone, rather than in a book, especially if it has because we had a GIF poem and we had videos that have been put up. So there's also the website. So essentially what the Aleph, and this is to wrap up our last 5 years as well as we wrap up this conversation, what Aleph has done is provide this platform, whether you agree with the voice or not. I think it's undeniable that there is a space that we've created where people can send in their work, where they can receive a mentorship.
Sorry to cut you short, but because the time is short, I mean that we post things 6 times a month. So one is each editor takes on curates for one fortnight. So the first piece is by that editor to let our readers also know that the individual voices within the Aleph review, the different kinds of, we all have different points of view, but we all have our own very particular voice. Second is an archive from the previous 4 issues to date. And then the last bit, which is a new piece. So twice a month we are publishing a new piece. And with Ilona, with Afshan's help, we also started the Spotlight series for authors to print much longer pieces of work. So, I mean, whereas in our book form, we are limited to 2,500 words or a bit over. In the Spotlight series, if somebody has written a very long piece, a short story, for example, it can be accommodated in the website, and I think some of them have done very well.
Yes. And so basically, before we wrap up, I'd like to ask one question. I think it's quite, considering that the Aleph review is a labor of love for all of us. All of us have other work that we do during the day. We have other creative projects as well. But I think one thing that sets us apart is that we worked as a very cohesive team right from the start. But we keep coming back to this volume every year, to this book, to compile it. And that's what I would like to leave off at. And I guess I'll go first and answer it first. Why we come back to Aleph? For me, I think it was very important because growing up, there was never any place in Pakistan where I could submit anything, or, apart from newspapers that had weekly writing sections. And there was no place where you would find mentors. I mean, right now I have my 3 mentors sitting right here when it comes to writing. So that's what keeps me coming back to it, to have this publication that we do for the sake of art and literature in Pakistan. And why do you all keep coming back? Why are we still here?
I think Afshan should go next, and then Ilona.
Well, I think that being a part of the Aleph review is such a pleasure, because I think individually we're all pretty curious, people who are interested in culture, and being part of Aleph really gives you a way to kind of think about things and also put your opinion out there, and also to learn from younger minds and established minds. So I think it's like a never-ending kind of love affair type thing. And of course, Mehvash Auntie and Ilona Auntie and all of you guys learning from Hassan as well. I mean, it's been a real pleasure. All 3 of you are brilliant.
And so are you. I mean, this is becoming a mutual admiration society.
Yeah,
but Ilona, Yeah.
I think we sometimes should take time out to admire each other's work. Auntie, what do you, I think I'll rephrase it a bit as well before you end this. Why do you keep coming back to Aleph, and what can people expect, in the coming years?
Well, I think I keep coming back to Aleph because when I was very young, like you, Mehvash, I used to participate in poetry writing competitions and so on. But then when I was an adult in the 80s until I think the late 90s, there really was nothing. I mean, where did you go if you wanted to be published? And if you sent things abroad, it usually came back with a rejection notice. So the fact that, we now have something local, and which is really, really good quality. And for me, that is the main thing. If you write, the quality must be excellent. It shouldn't be just okay. It has to be as good as possible. Excellence is what we strive for, I think.
True.
And to you, Mehvash Auntie, so as closing remarks, essentially, what can people expect from us and from this our fifth anniversary issue? And where do you see, as the person who's been the guiding force behind all of it, where do you see us?
Well, the guiding forces can do nothing without backup forces to propel them. So you guys are really, really amazing, all of you. But where I see us going is that we've been so caught up in the creative part of Aleph that actually this year I want to push it towards more the marketing side, right? Being able to market it, being able to have it available for anybody in Pakistan who sends us a request to get the book, maybe directly, without the intercession of bookshops, because sometimes there's so many books in a shop that I think sometimes I forget, which one is the Aleph. I mean, people go to Liberty, say in Karachi, and they come back and they get in touch with me that they've run out of your books, so why don't you send them more? And I said, well, they have to ask us. So that's one aspect of it that I am very much going to look into, that we market ourselves properly across the board in Pakistan and going abroad as well. Second thing that I want to do is put all our back issues in libraries all over Pakistan. So we are coming up with a very, very interesting sponsor. Please remember that without sponsors, there's no validity in any journal. I mean, for example, any magazine has ads. So our journal also has sponsors. It has to have them, because otherwise it would be a form of vanity publication, really. It's because those sponsors like Dawn, ICI, Pepsi, and so many individual sponsors like Pasha Fabrics, etc., have seen something in us that they feel that it's worth sponsoring, and that gives us the validity to also to continue. The voices do. The voices in the Aleph Review, also the sponsors. And I've sat down with a very interesting sponsor who is now, through further sponsorship in the future, we are going to try and put our books in, inshallah, all the libraries in Pakistan, all the major libraries, or anything. For example, if you have been abroad, Hassan, and you wish to sponsor on a large scale or small our book, if you want to, for example, give then 5 issues of that book to your alma mater, you can. I mean, you can tell us. We'll stamp your name on the book. We'll send it to that library if they accept us, and the same within Pakistan. So what I want to do is that all the young people who, any university that has a creative writing program or an arts program should have access to the Aleph Review from the library. That is, and inshallah, we'll keep on doing this as long as we are able, I hope.
Yeah. Yes. And I think that's I'll just wrap up with that as well, that any publication is as good as its readership, as well as, you know, the people who are writing. So it's very, very important. We're very thankful to the people, especially to platforms such as LLF, that have continued to, you know, back us up, to spread the word that there is a homegrown publication that provides an audience, because without an audience, I guess,
You're just
as a writer, you're just writing for yourself then, or just for people around you. So, and on that note, I'm glad that we all got a chance to, I think this is the first time we actually sat down and actually had a talk about the Aleph. And I thank the LLF for that, the entire team. And I mean, your launch last year was instrumental, because we didn't really have our own because of the pandemic. And let's hope this year we're able to have one of our own. But till then, everybody, please keep a lookout on our social media pages for when the 5th volume is going to be out. I hope it will be by the end of February, and you know, barring any other delays. And till then, I'm Hassan Tahir. We were joined by Afshan Shafi, Ilona Yusaf, and Mehvash Amin for the Aleph review. Thank you so much.
Thank you.